Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Bob.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob, an alcoholic. Thank you, Patrice, for inviting me to be here. I was here a little over a year ago, and this is one of my favorite meetings. I'm not just saying that. Some of my favorite people are at this meeting. I got to know Brian and Brian over here, and when we got to meet them, I couldn't tell them apart. I didn't know which Brian was which, and turned out one Brian went to Yale, so they became Yale Brian and Jail Brian. This is not an intellectual exercise today, as you have probably already found out. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, went to my first meeting while I was a sophomore at Notre Dame as a joke, and I dressed up like a bum, and I went there, and I was 19 years old, and at the end of the meeting, they gave me the 20 questions, and I answered 19 of the 20 yes. And so I figured this was just a recruiting tool to build up your membership, and so I went back out and drank for 9 more years. So sobered up in the San Fernando Valley, and about 17 years ago, I moved out to Oxnard. I live right by the beach in Oxnard now, and weather's about like this, pretty nice, and didn't know any meetings, and so finally I found one on a Friday night at a Catholic church, and I went there, and 9 o'clock, I pulled out of the parking lot and went down to Channel Islands Boulevard and took a right and started to drive home, and felt claustrophobic. And then I saw the cones changing 2 lanes into 1. Then I saw the sign that said, license and sobriety check ahead. Well, I don't know about you, but when I was drinking, I never got caught in a sobriety check. So I thought maybe I should see what it feels like. So I inched forward to these 3 police persons, 2 women and a man, and the man had one of those long flashlights. And I handed him my license and registrations, and he aimed the flashlight at me, and the first thing he said was, "How long since you had a drink?" And I said, "January 24th, 1967. The 3 of them looked at each other, and they started to laugh, and they handed me the license back and had it said, have a good evening. And I really had a good evening. It was so good that the next night I snuck out of the house and drove all over Ventura County trying to get caught in another sobriety check. So anyway, I'm here. I've been sober 44 years and almost 10 and a half months or something like that. January 24th will be 45 years if I stay sober, and I don't take it for granted. I take it a day at a time. I have a simple program, and I have a fairly simple life. I was born in Detroit, and when I was 8, we moved to Massachusetts, and I was brought up, and it was the dream of every Irish Catholic family in New England to send their son to Notre Dame, and I'm the son that got to go to Notre Dame. I was a good student, my mother, I just found about 10 years ago, my mother had this baby book she kept I know. From the time I was 1 till I was 5, and the first 4 years, she wrote like 2 pages every year about this angelic little boy, the sweetest thing you ever saw, and just went on, and I read all 4, and on my 5th birthday, she wrote in, "Not as nice as he used to be." Never made another entry any year after that. So this is what you get. So, but I grew up, and I was a nice kid, and I was an altar boy, and I was a Boy Scout, and I was a good athlete and a good student, and we lived in an idyllic neighborhood. We had a 3-acre home with or a lot or whatever you call it, with a trout stream running through it, and a baseball field in back, and a skating pond across the street, and it was a good life. And neither of my parents were alcoholic, and neither is my brother or sister. But when I was 15 years old, I was just moving right along through life, it seemed, but I was nervous and jittery and quick, and I didn't know what, I was agitated, but I didn't know what it was. But on the outwardly, you couldn't notice this too much. But this friend of mine said baseball practice got canceled. This friend of mine said, let's get a couple of quarts of beer. So we got 2 quarts for him and 2 quarts for me. And I drank my 2 quarts of beer sitting in that park, and everything in my life changed from that moment on. I knew things were going to be different from then on. I wore glasses, I had pimples, I bit my fingernails, I was really nervous around girls. You couldn't see all this when you talked to me or looked at me, but this is how I felt. And I was really, there was a lot of spinning going on inside me. I drank those 2 quarts of beer, and everything just calmed down. It was just a humming motor, and I looked around just looking for somebody to impress. And there was nobody there, but which was usually the case for me. In any case, I got through high school. Every time I got drunk, I got grounded, and so I didn't get any trouble through high school. And as I accepted at a number of colleges, including Notre Dame, and I went away to college. In my freshman year, they locked me up, and I couldn't get away to get at alcohol. And so, since that was the case, I got good grades, and I played sports, and everybody was proud of me. And by my sophomore year, I'd figured out how to go down the fire escape and how to do these other things and get into town and that. And like I said, by the May of my sophomore year, as I went to an AA meeting, and there was no question that I was an alcoholic, but I certainly had some drinking to do. So for the last 3 years of my stewardship at Notre Dame, I was my whole life spiraled down. So I just couldn't function, but it was bred into me, I think, that you finish what you start. And when the heat really got on, I'd stop drinking, I'd take the test, I'd study, I'd take the test, pass the test, and move on to the next grade. And I never got thrown out, but I was always on disciplinary and academic probation, and I didn't work anywhere near my abilities, but nonetheless, I squeaked on by and graduated with my class. It was ironic, in my senior year, my mother wouldn't send me money for anything anymore. And in like April of my senior year, I called her up and I said, Mom, I said the class rings go on sale next week, and I need $85. And she bought it, and she sent me the $85, but the money got there on Friday, and the rings didn't go on sale till Monday. I don't need to finish the story, do I? So I got home that summer, and every Friday night my mother would say, where's your class ring? And I'd make up a lie. Oh, it maybe got lost in the mail. And maybe they messed up the engraving the next week, and maybe they sent the wrong person. It's all kinds of things can happen. Just be patient. And finally, after a year, she never asked me again. And it was, again, ironic, because I never got the ring. And 26 years later, I went back to Notre Dame for a football weekend with my friend Vince, who a lot of you knew. He passed away with a lot of years of sobriety, and my 2 daughters. And we have an annual trip. We go back and see who beats them this year. I've been to 2 games. I was in Palo Alto last Saturday night and saw them get beat again. And we were at the SC game this year. But last year we beat SC, so. In any case, I've lost my train of thought. So anyway, my mother sent me the money. I didn't get the ring. She asked me every Friday night, where's your ring? And I'd make up another lie. I did this for a year. And I had to become really creative to make up a lie every Friday night of why my ring hadn't arrived yet. And finally, she quit. And so I went back to Notre Dame with Vince, and we went into the bookstore, which is about the size of Macy's. And they sell all this Notre Dame paraphernalia, jackets and sweaters and a few books. But Anyway, we saw this little room that had the size of a closet, had a sign on that said class rings. So I said to my daughter, go get Vince. I can't do this alone. So my Vince and my daughter Lynn and I stood in line, and I walked up to the counter, and I said to the woman, can you still get a class ring, 26 years after you're graduated? And she said, well, if you graduated and you've got the money, you can get it. So my $85 class ring cost $319. And I figured it out. It's supposed to be there in like 7 weeks. So I figured out the day was supposed to be there. I wrote my daughter a note so she'd get off from school and wait for the mailman. And she called me after mailman came and no ring. Wrote my other daughter a note to school the next day, and she waited, no ring. And the third day I waited. And we did this for like 2 weeks, and I was so frustrated. So I said to my secretary, call back there and find out where's the ring. She called me that afternoon, and she said, I called the bookstore, and they said they messed up the engraving. And you'll have it in a few weeks. So ironically, my life is on irony, on January 23rd, 1987, my class ring came. It was the eve of my 20th AA birthday, and my class ring came. And I never said anything to my mother, but a few months later, she was in the hospital. I went back to Massachusetts, and we talked for a few minutes, and I said, oh, by the way, Mom, my ring came. She didn't remember the story. She didn't remember the angst and the guilt and all that I'd felt for all those years. And we cried together. And when it came time to make amends in Alcoholics Anonymous, I owed most of my amends to my parents. I was a blackout drinker, and I did things that I have no recollection of. And I went to my mother after a year of sobriety, and I said, it's time for me to make amends, and you got to tell me what you want me to do, because I just don't know where to start for all the pain and suffering I've caused you and my dad. And she said, all you have to do to make any amends to me is just stay close to those people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so for the next 43 years and 10 months, that's what I've done. And it's a pretty good formula. It's a pretty happy formula, you know. When I got into, I'll skip over the rest of it. I went in the Navy. I went into Ethiopia. My first set of orders, that's horrible. I was there for a year and a half, and I got transferred back to the Pentagon, and I drank prodigious amounts of alcohol and got in all kinds of trouble. But again, whenever heat really came on, I stopped drinking. And when I stopped drinking, I'm like the poster boy for the Navy or for Notre Dame or anything else. And I'll do everybody's job, and everybody likes me. And then I start drinking, and I become Mr. Hyde, you know. I mean, it gets really bad. So anyway, I made it through the Navy, but I felt so badly that I did such a poor job. That I didn't give them a good service, you know. I was there for 4 years, and I was a mediocre Navy officer, and it always troubled me. So anyway, I was finally discharged from the Navy and the Pentagon right after I got out of the Pentagon, and I got an honorable discharge. And my friends, one of my friends said to me, "You're drinking so much." She said, "You ought to settle down, and get married." I don't have to finish that story. Same thing. I got married. She left me 40 times in the first year, and finally I was fired from 3 jobs. I got transferred out to California, and on January 24th, 1967, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous on my shield. There was no more, you know, somebody asked me recently, how much money did you have left when you got to AA? I said, if I'd had $20 more, I'd have a different sobriety date. Or no sobriety date at all, it was more likely. So I'm very blessed and very fortunate. And, my life has been a miracle to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. I came into AA and I started doing the work of AA. I got a sponsor named Warren, lived down in Laguna, right next door to Chuck C., and he was my sponsor for 2 years. And then he got galloping leukemia, and he died within 6 days. And I was without a sponsor for 2 or 3 months, but his wife, Betty, kept saying, go see Chuck C. So finally, after about 2 or 3 months, I went and saw Chuck, and he became my sponsor for the next 15 years until he passed away. And what an experience, you know. You hear somebody came up to me, I guess Jerry came up to me before the meetings, and he said he'd been reading or listening to the New Pair of Glasses. Well, I was on the retreat when they made the tapes from which the book A New Pair of Glasses was made, and so I knew him really well. And it influenced my life, and I had a crisis in my life about 25 years ago that was just devastating. I didn't sleep right for like 9 months, and the only way I could get to sleep at night was to lay the tape recorder on her pillow and listen to the New Pair of Glasses for an hour until it clicked off. And so I'd fall asleep within a couple of minutes, but the problem was at an hour it clicked off and I woke up, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I knew my night's sleep was over. And so I studied it very closely, and I was real close to Chuck, and we had a nice relationship. And all of his lessons that I didn't learn then, I learned later, listening to the tapes and remembering some of those things he said and understanding them a little bit better. When I was sober 6 months or so, sober 6 months, they got me involved in the central office. I started answering the telephones in the San Fernando Valley central office, and then when I was sober a year, they got me involved in general service, and I became a GSR and later a district committee member, and finally the treasurer of the Southern California Assembly area. And this was back when the general service meetings were rough and tumble. I mean, but they have been really rough and tumble. They'd have an election every 2 years, and this guy Al M. from North Hollywood would show up with his own candidate and with about 40 guys out of the recovery houses, new GSRs, to vote for him. And I'm not making this up. And so it was like the Wild West in those days. But I survived that, and then later I started working on conventions, and I worked on the Southern California Convention for many years, and then the Desert Roundup when it was down there. I put on the 10K run for years, and then eventually the Ventura County Convention. And so I've done a lot of work. I've done all the work of Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm aware of. I sponsor people. I have I'll tell you what happened yesterday. I went to a memorial for this couple out in Westlake. He died about 4 months ago, and she died about a month ago. Norm and Dorothy were their names, and I came in January of 1967. They came in on Cinco de Mayo of 1967. They're the sweetest couple, gentle people. They came to the AA meeting, on the Friday night speaker meeting in Canoga Park at the time, and they came to the meeting. They liked it so much, they stopped on the way home and had a drink. And they went on home after that, still feeling great, and they never took another drink again. So Norm and Dorothy were just the sweetest, kindest people you ever knew, and it was an honor to be friendly with both of them. I'll tell you a little quick story about they had 2 daughters and 2 sons, and the one daughter had already moved up to Seattle. She was there yesterday at the thing, and I reminded her. I said, Dorothy told me a story about Debbie. She said Debbie drove her nuts because Dorothy was still drinking, and Debbie had this little invisible friend named Ing that lived on top of the refrigerator. And every time Debbie spilled something or something went wrong, she'd say, "I didn't do it, Ing did it." And so Dorothy got fed up with this, and she was drinking a lot. And so when Debbie was about 5, she said she had one of those episodes, and she took Debbie by the hand and her invisible friend Ing by the hand and walked Ing over and flushed him down the toilet. And we all laughed, and so Debbie was there. She's about 50 now. She says, "I'm still not potty trained after that." Anyway, that's an aside. I told you this was not an intellectual exercise for anybody here. Anyway, like I said, I got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did all the work of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I was about 9 years sober, we lived in the valley, and my wife at the time came up and she said, I want to get my daughter, our oldest daughter, involved in this little girls softball league, which is right near our house. And I was busy with AA, but I said, okay. She said, well, all the parents have to come to the first meeting because they don't have much money. And so I went to the meeting. By then, I'd had my own business, so I went out there for the tryouts, and I hit them some grounders. And the coach of the team that they selected, Lynn, saw me out there, and he came up and he said, well, I need an assistant coach. Would you be the assistant coach? And so the kids drew the colors of the uniforms, and they drew purple. And then the girls got to pick the name of the team, so they became the Purple Panthers in the Little Girls Softball League in Woodland Hills. And next thing I knew, I'm the assistant coach of the Little Girls Softball team in Woodland Hills. And I had coached these teams in the Navy, and so I knew how to motivate these sailors. And so I coached them through they were 9 and 10-year-old girls, and I coached them through their first 6 exhibition games. They won them all. And they won the first 3 games of the season. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm driving down the freeway thinking, I wonder if they've ever elected an assistant coach to their Hall of Fame. And really getting carried away. And then they lost the game, and then they won another game, and they lost another game, and I wasn't much for losing. And so I figured, well, maybe I'll lean on them a little, like I did the sailors. And so I'd holler at them a little, and then, try to encourage them in a negative way. And they just kept getting worse. This other coach came to me. He came up to me. He said, "Coach, where's your center fielder?" I said, "She's in center field." He said, "No, she's not. She's over there hugging her mother's leg because you yelled at her when she struck out." I mean, I'll tell you, it's just driving me crazy. And it was all about me. And so I didn't know what to do. And so I went down to talk to Chuck. And I didn't know. And this other couple I knew in AA had 2 daughters that were about 11 and 13, and girls were incorrigible. They didn't know what to do with them, and how to get them to turn around. They just couldn't. And the mother and father both in AA, and they'd go to meetings and they'd dread coming home. And so finally they came home one night and they sat in the driveway, and the wife said to the husband, "Why don't we just treat them like two little newcomers that just walked into the AA meeting and love them instead of trying to judge them and scold them and beat them or whatever they did to them." And so they walked in the house and they started treating them like 2 little newcomers that just walked in the door and in AA, and everything about the household changed. Everything about their lives changed and continued to change. They had their ups and downs, but nonetheless, everything changed. And I heard that message, and I talked to Chuck, and he said, you got to treat them like newcomers, and that just came into AA. So I went back to, and then they had another little episode. I like to go over this one fast. A woman who was a manager of our team called me aside, and she said, the women managers are having a meeting next week. And I said, what are they meeting for? She said, to throw you out of the league. And I wanted to say, you don't understand, I've been sober 9 years in AA, and they didn't know I ever took a drink. So I said, well, what is it that's bothering everybody? They were all afraid of you. You're intense, and you yell, and the girls are afraid of you, the scorekeepers are afraid of you, the umpires are afraid of you. Everybody's afraid of you. And so that's when I went to see Chuck, and I told him the story, and he said, you got to treat them. So I went back and I just started treating the Purple Panthers, the 13 of them, like little newcomers, just walked in an AA meeting. And everything about them changed. I mean, I didn't yell at them. And when they'd strike out, I'd go hug them, and they'd make an error. I'd stop the game and go tell them I loved them. And I just... Listen, I was doing my best, Steve. It's not like the Dodgers. So I never yelled at them. I mean, I never threatened them, never did anything. I just treated them like newcomers, just walked like the lady from Chicago. Just walk in an AA meeting, and we just love you to death, You're home. You're finally home. And that's how they must have felt, because they never lost another game. And when we played the championship game between the team that won the first half and us who won the second half, afterwards we won 17-4 or something, and we went down to Shakey's Pizza Parlor out in Woodland Hills, and I'm up on the fireplace with 3 Purple Panthers under each arm with my purple shirt, my purple hat, hoping no customers of mine walked in and saw me, and we're doing the can, and when we got down, the girls got together and they said 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate? The coaches. And I started to cry. And I don't think I'd cried for 9 years before that. You know, I'd come into AA and just tried to gut it on through and just be, you know, I just wanted you to see in me what I wanted you to, the image that I wanted to project. And I finally became real enough so you could see the real me. And I never have stopped crying since then. My business career also was, when I got to AA, the day before I got to AA, I was fired from my job. And it took me 2 weeks with the help of my cousin down on the South Bay to find another job. I kept that job for a year, and I was fired when I was a year sober. And it was humiliating. So I hustled out, and I found another job within a couple of weeks, and I kept it for 9 months, and they sold the company. And the guy called me in and he said, we sold the company and you make more than anybody, so we're going to let you go first. And I got fired again when I'm 22 months sober, and it's getting bad, you know. And so I went out really hard looking for a good job, and I worked hard at the job. I got a good one, and I kept it for 5 years. They told me I was going to be the next manager in the company, and and everything looked great. And 5 years after I went to work for them, they fired my boss. And since they trained me to be the replacement, they brought in a guy from Milwaukee and made him the replacement. And here I was, still a salesman. And I thought to myself, well, there's no way he can fire me. I've been the best salesman for 4 of the 5 years. And 3 months later, he fired me. Here I am, 7 years sober. I've been fired 3 times in sobriety. And I said, screw this. I went out and started my own business, and I have not been fired in 34 years or whatever. Long time, anyway. Long time. And my 39-year-old daughter is now the vice president of my company, and it's hard to cover a 44 and a half years, whatever it is, and in a short time. But it's these things that happen to us. You know, even in sobriety, life keeps happening to us, even when we're sober up. We don't get an easy coast ride, I don't think. We got to work, and the more we work, the better we do. I sponsor a guy in Texas, and he's been having business problems and family problems, and about 5 days ago, I said, how many meetings are you going to? He said, well, I try to make it to 1 a week. Yeah. I said, well, why don't you start going at 7 o'clock? I said, your wife doesn't get up early, and you do. Why don't you start going to some 7 a.m. meetings? So for 2 of the last 3 days, he sent me an email saying, hey, that really works. I don't know how you sponsors figure that out. But I have been a meeting goer since I got here. I have averaged 4 meetings a week at least for the whole time that I've been sober. And I rarely ever go to lesson 4, and sometimes if I come to the end of a week and I haven't been to 2 or 3 already, I might go to 5 on the weekend, and I know where they are, and they're not far from my house. But I don't care if they are far from my house. Meetings just do have a certain effect on me that calms me down and makes me okay with you and the world and everything else. When I was about 12 years sober, I was going through a divorce, and it was a very tough time. I had 2 daughters, Lynn and Kathy, and they were 12 and 7 at the time. And I just adored them then, and I adore them now. They were the joy of life for me, just watching them grow up and loving them and caring for them. And I would coach their soccer teams, and I coached their softball teams, and I worked with them on their homework. And by then I had my own business, and they'd call a PTA meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there'd be 27 mothers and me at the PTA meeting. But that was okay. I mean, I did everything. And it came time when Chuck finally said to me, it's time for you to leave the marriage. I just couldn't believe that he would say that. But I knew it was time. It had been going sour for a couple of years, and so I moved out like a thief in the night. And I remember on Labor Day weekend packing my stuff and driving, making about 4 trips in the dark so nobody would see me, because I was so ashamed and so humiliated. And I hated leaving those 2 little girls, but that was that. And so I was going through that thing, and I had to, and I realized I had to do something to, get some exercise. I've always exercised all my life, but I heard the running craze was just then kicking in. So I went down to the high school right near where I lived, where my daughter ended up going, and I ran and I jogged a quarter of a mile, 1 lap around the track, and I was exhausted. It was like May of 1978, I guess, and I was just exhausted. And went home, and the next night I went back and ran another lap, and tired. And within a couple of weeks, few weeks, I could run 1.5 miles. And to make a long story short, with 11 months later, I found myself in Griffith Park, lined up to run the Hang 10 Marathon, 26 miles, 385 yards. And I'd only run half of that distance up until that time, and I looked at the training thing, and I just didn't have time to do all that training. So I just figured I'd show up and give it a try. And I was still humiliated from the divorce, and I was going through all kinds of turmoil. And so anyway, I lined up and I started running with these people, and I ran out to 13 miles and halfway, and I felt pretty good. And got to 15.5 miles, and I saw my car for the last time, and I felt pretty good. And I got to 20 miles, and I'd heard these reports of at 20 miles you hit the wall, and I thought, I got a smirk on my face. It must be for lesser people. So I'm running along, and then all of a sudden my arm just flew up like that. And I looked, and it's back down here, and it felt like like I was Mr. Potato Head, and somebody just pushed my button, and all my body parts are falling off. And I got 6 miles to go, and I thought, there's no way I got to slow down some. So I slowed down, and I started running the best I could for the last few miles, and everything. My left knee just ground in every step, and finally I got close to the finish line, and they string these flags, like at a supermarket opening, these plastic flags for the last couple of 100 yards of a marathon. And when you get up there, friends and relatives, of which I had none, line up on either side, and they applaud your effort. I guess it feels pretty good. And so anyway, I got up to that point, so I straightened up to look as good as I could, and I start running down there, and the people started applauding, and then they start cheering and screaming, and some guy yells out, "Here comes a woman!" And I look over my shoulder, and this woman is bearing down on me. I hadn't seen a woman in 45 minutes. All my macho came back. There's no way I'm going to let her pass me. So I run like hell, and she lopes right up on my shoulder and says, Bob Regan, and I look, and it's June G. She was 19 years old at the time. She'd been sober 6 years in AA, and the first thing I said to her is, "Why do you wait 26 miles to humiliate me in front of all these people?" She said, "I didn't run the race. I just saw you go by, so I jumped over the flags to run in with her." So I sponsor a lot of guys, and I sponsor about like a lot of guys and one woman. Been trying to get rid of that woman for 6 years, and I haven't been able to yet, but she's still for sale. So and I sponsor them with a pretty loose rein. I'm not here to. Most of the people I sponsor have been sober, 10 or 15 or mostly over 20 years, and they've been through the steps, and they know what to do, but they have problems. We all have problems, and so I sort of sponsor them with a loose rein. I tell them my experiences. People have come up to me and said, "You're going to fire me if I do this?" I said, "You can do anything you want. My only job is to share me with you, share my experiences with you, and then you can do anything you want with it. It's not my business. A sponsor is the the sponsor is there to give of himself, not to take, not to give orders, not to tell you what you have to do. At least that's my that's how Chuck was with me, and that's how I see it, and that's how I do it, and it seemed to be a pretty good formula. When I moved out to the Navy, to Oxnard, I had I had to find a home group, and so I finally found one of all places on a Navy base, and so I go in there and I start, and they got these redneck sailors, Choice and Dave, and so I nicknamed them Leroy and Bubba because they're a couple of rednecks from the South. And I started nicknaming everybody, and we had a lot of fun, and everybody's been sober a long time, it seems. And the next thing you know, I'm sponsoring like 7 guys that are retired Navy chiefs and Navy officers. And I keep looking back sometimes at my amends, my 9th step. And about 2 years ago, I looked at it and I said, what's ironic again, the irony of my life, is that I was so worried that I'd never be able to make amends to the Navy for doing such a bad job. And here, my home group is on a Navy base. And 7 of the guys I sponsor are retired Navy guys, and I know I'm adding to their lives. So it's just a great gift for me. One last little story I'll tell you. That same year I ran the marathon and June ran me down. I had signed up and went back. Was getting ready to go back to New York City to run the New York City Marathon. And the night before, my daughters were always over for sleepovers and all that. And Kathy at that time was 7, and she came over the night before I was going to leave. And she was sitting in the living room when the 6 o'clock news was on, or Tom Brokaw, or whatever it was, and they played the news, and the last segment on there talked about a guy that ran a marathon back east for the first time, and his whole family showed up, and he crossed the finish line and had a heart attack and died. And Kathy was sitting in there watching it, and I said, man, and I heard it because I was drying the dishes in the kitchen. I said, she didn't say a word for the rest of the evening. And I put her to bed about 9:30, and she said, again, she was 7 years old. She said, Daddy, do you think you're going to die when you run that New York City Marathon? And I said, well, I don't think so, Kathy. I've trained better, and most of the people get through it fine, and I expect I'll be fine, so you don't have to worry about me. She said, well, you don't have to worry, she said, because if you die, I'm not going to let them bury you. I'm going to keep you in my closet. So, for 44 years and 10 months, people have been telling me in different ways that they love me. Nobody more eloquently than Kathy did that time, and my life is blessed, and you bless it, and I love you all. God bless you. Thank you for having me.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.